Imagine waking up, opening your laptop and checking your crypto portfolio.
Right.
You log into your dashboard, and there it is, like a balance that officially makes you a millionaire.
Just a surreal feeling.
Exactly. You are holding this massive stack of ATLA tokens, and the screen says they are trading at $150 a piece. And in just a few days, the lockup period expired.
How the floodgates open.
Right, you might be sitting there right now listening to this, literally planning to pay off your mortgage or, clear your debts, maybe change your entire life the second that unlock hits on August 17th.
It is a massive moment.
But what if I told you there is a mathematical trap waiting on that exact date, like a mechanical bottleneck in the market that could turn that entire fortune into pennies in exactly 15 minutes?
Yeah, and that is a terrifying reality for thousands of people right now. I mean, it is the ultimate standoff between the numbers on a screen and the actual physical limits of financial liquidity.
It really is.
So, if you are listening to this, you are likely standing at one of the most monumental financial crossroads of your life, facing this massive decision about your tokens and really the broader ATOM ecosystem.
And the main problem is you are being asked to make this massive decision while navigating what is basically a total information blackout.
Or just an overload of rumors.
Right, exactly. Like you might have seen the price flash on an exchange or heard some whisper about a Saudi investor, or maybe you caught a fragment of an angry Telegram voice note.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
But you can't navigate a crossroads if you don't actually understand the terrain, right? You need to know exactly how this project arrived at this specific precarious moment.
Which, is our mission today. We are going to provide a clear, completely unvarnished, highly technical briefing on the 3-year history of blockchain sports and the ATOM ecosystem.
The whole story.
The whole thing. We will trace the arc from a severely underfunded $30 million launch through a structural collapse into this massive American rescue operation, and finally into the exact mathematical reality of that upcoming token unlock.
But, before we start dissecting the mechanics of all that, we need to establish our baseline. Everything we discuss in this deep dive today is built strictly from official strategy documents, internal community memos, and leadership call transcripts from July 15th and July 17th, 2026.
Yeah, and we really must issue a crucial disclaimer for you, the listener, right up front.
Absolutely.
The financial figures, the corporate valuations, the stated capital commitments we are going to analyze, these are all presented as leadership's stated claims.
Right. These are internal claims.
Exactly. These are internal representations, not facts independently audited by some external accounting firm like, Deloitte or Ernst & Young. This deep dive is purely for your information and education as you weigh your options. It is absolutely not financial advice.
Okay, let's unpack this because, to understand the math of the August 17th unlock, to really understand why you are suddenly being asked to vote on the fate of your own assets, we first have to understand the psychology and the history of the foundation.
You really do.
And every single version of this corporate history traces back to one individual, the founder, Dmitry Saxonov, who is known as Dima.
Yeah, you simply cannot separate the ecosystem from the founder. I mean, Dima's personal history is the engine of the company, but it also became its most massive structural liability.
Which is fascinating.
It is. And to understand why, we have to go back to a very specific macroeconomic event, the 2014 Belarusian currency crisis.
Okay, wait. Why does a currency crisis in 2014 matter to a blockchain sports project in 2026?
Well, because it created a cash flow trap that completely defined his early career. So in 2014, Belarus was experiencing severe economic instability. I mean, inflation was rampant, foreign exchange was drying up.
It's total chaos.
Total chaos.
Yeah.
And Dima was operating in this environment, trying to execute a pretty standard arbitrage play. He took out a bank loan to import 10 cars from outside the country with the intention of reselling them domestically at a markup.
Okay, so you buy an asset where it's cheap, you move it across a border, and you sell it where it's expensive. I mean, that's the oldest business model in the world.
Precisely. But arbitrage relies on velocity.
Yeah.
Right. You have to move the inventory quickly so you can pay back the loan.
Right.
But suddenly, the rules of the game changed. A sudden shift in Belarusian commercial law effectively barred the sale of multiple imported cars for an entire year.
Wait, so he takes a commercial loan, buys actual physical inventory, and the government just arbitrarily says, you cannot legally sell this stuff for 12 months.
Yeah, that is exactly what happened. And, creditors do not care about sudden shifts in government policy. They just want their yield.
They want their money.
Exactly. So this new law trapped his capital in physical cars that he literally couldn't liquidate. His cash flow went to absolute zero, which immediately triggered intense court pressure and these unresolved credit disputes. He was totally cornered financially.
So how does someone even get out of a frozen car lot situation like that?
By completely abandoning the physical world.
Really?
Yeah. By 2016, he pivots hard into early Bitcoin mining. And this wasn't some small hobbyist set up in a garage. According to Demonazan's statements in a June 2026 leadership meeting, by 2017, his mining operation was scaling aggressively. He claimed it was generating roughly $1 million per month in revenue.
Wow, that is a staggering turnaround. I mean, going from drowning in commercial debt on 10 cars to pulling $1 million a month out of early crypto networks.
It is incredible, but, the past is rarely done with you.
Oh, no.
Yeah, just as the mining operation was peaking in 2017, a competitor in the business arena allegedly dug up those old 2014-era credit disputes. They basically weaponized his past, using those unresolved issues to file active police reports against him.
But wait, if he was making $1 million a month, surely he had already paid off a loan for just 10 cars, right?
He is adamant that he did. Dima claims the debts were fully settled. But in complex jurisdictions, the legal machinery, once it gets in motion, it can be very difficult to stop.
Yeah.
Especially if it's being pushed by a highly motivated competitor.
That makes sense.
So in 2017, he was arrested. He spent 6 months in pretrial detention, just staring down a potential 6-year prison sentence.
6 years for a disputed commercial loan that he claims was already paid.
Yeah. And to avoid the risk of a half-decade sentence, he took a plea deal. Ultimately, he served 2 years and 3 months in prison.
I really want to look at how this event is processed because it creates this fascinating friction. When Dima pitches to his community, he uses this prison stint as proof of his grit.
He wears it like a badge of honor.
Exactly. In the official July 2026 strategy documents, the narrative is basically, look, I made early business mistakes in a brutal economy. I paid the price, but I didn't break. It stripped away the fake friends, and it made me resilient. It's like a classic underdog redemption story.
And that narrative works flawlessly when you were trying to rally a loyal, community-driven crypto base. People really resonate with a leader who has taken a huge hit and survived.
Right. They love a comeback.
They do. And this is where the friction really begins. A redemption arc means absolutely nothing to an institutional compliance officer.
Because traditional finance operates on algorithms of risk, not emotion.
Exactly. When a multi-billion-dollar venture capital fund runs a background check, they aren't looking for a hero's journey. They're looking for liabilities.
Yeah.
And a criminal record for financial irregularities is just an automatic, non-negotiable red flag.
It's like, I don't know, trying to get top-tier government security clearance to work at the Pentagon, but you have a highly publicized blog detailing your past associations with known cybercriminals.
That is a great analogy.
Right. Like, you can argue all day that you learned from it, that it made you a better cybersecurity expert, that you've totally repented. The underwriter does not care. The clearance is denied. The system is just designed to reject that specific profile.
And that tension between a founder whose resilience inspires retail communities, but whose record terrifies institutional money, that is the tectonic fault line underneath this entire blockchain sports story.
So he gets out of prison. It's 2020. He has lost the massive mining operation. He is basically starting from absolute zero with a small circle of brothers, cousins, and friends.
Right back to square one.
Yeah. And from this 0 point, they launched the original vision for blockchain sports.
And we have to admit, the vision was undeniably audacious. I mean, they didn't just want to launch another speculative digital token. They wanted to tear down what they called the walled gardens of the global sports industry.
So what exactly is a walled garden in this context?
Think about how a young football prodigy is discovered in, say, Brazil. Private academies and massive sports agencies scout them very early. They lock them into these exclusive contracts, and they capture almost all the economic upside when that player is sold to a European Premier League team for $50 million.
It's a totally closed system.
It is.
Yeah.
The fans, the local community, they get nothing but the entertainment value.
The rich get richer, the agencies take their massive cut, and the fan just, buys the jersey.
Right. So the blockchain sports white paper proposed tokenizing the athletes and the academies themselves. They wanted to build a system where ordinary fans could provide the foundational funding for these physical academies and, in return, hold tokens that represented a real economic stake in the future success of those athletes.
And what's wild to me is that they actually started building the physical footprint for this. Like, it wasn't just a shiny PDF in a Discord server.
No, they were laying real bricks. According to their official roadmaps, they established physical football academies in Rio de Janeiro and Sobral, Brazil. They negotiated with the Ministry of Sport to gain access to 328 football fields for talent scouting in Brazil's Ceará state.
That is a massive scale.
It is. They ran FC Unit X labs in the Belarusian First League, actively pushing for Premier League licensing. I mean, they brought in over 200 students and collaborated with dozens of real football legends.
Okay, but building physical academies in South America, running professional football clubs in Eastern Europe, and trying to build a custom Layer 1 blockchain to tokenize it all, I mean, that requires a staggering amount of capital. Where is the money coming from?
It was coming entirely from the community, specifically a massive influx from the Limitless community, which was spearheaded by partners Jeremy, Edward, and Ilya. Members of this community bought into the vision by purchasing what they called founder packs, and attached to these packs were ATLA tokens.
And this is where we really have to look closely at the math, because a massive structural flaw was baked into this project from day one.
There is an internal document called the Evolution Memo that leadership circulated later on, and it details a pretty chilling mathematical reality. So through these community sales, the project raised roughly $30 million.
I mean, 30 million sounds like a lot of money to a normal person.
It is a lot of money. Until you price out the actual cost of their vision, the internal estimate of what it would cost to build out the global physical academies, secure all that land, develop the proprietary blockchain infrastructure, and fund the athlete pipelines.
It wasn't 30 million.
What was it?
It was estimated in the hundreds of millions, up to roughly $1 billion.
I need to stop you there. They raised $30 million, but their own internal roadmap required hundreds of millions. That's not just a budget shortfall. That's operating fundamentally bankrupt from the moment the ink dried.
It is structurally fatal. You simply cannot build a $1 billion physical footprint on a $30 million budget.
You just can't. No. But what makes it worse is the cognitive dissonance in the promises made to the community. Members who bought those founder packs were operating under the expectation of rapid liquidity, especially in certain international groups like the Japanese community. There are widespread reports that members were told they could expect to sell their ATLA tokens for $2 to $3 within just a month or two of them unlocking.
How can you possibly promise rapid high-yield liquidity to retail investors when, internally that you are hundreds of millions of dollars short of actually building the underlying value?
You were touching on the absolute core controversy of the early project. Was it malice or was it extreme blinding optimism? Leadership's stance is that they truly believed they could use the initial $30 million to build enough momentum to attract subsequent massive funding rounds.
Like seed capital.
Exactly. They thought the $30 million was just the seed, but the community treated it like a finished product that would yield immediate dividends.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you have this massive psychological pressure cooker, right? A community aggressively watching the calendar, expecting lucrative returns from their tokens, while the founders are staring at a bank account, realizing they don't have a fraction of what they need to finish the job. And then, right when they are walking this financial tightrope, the external environment turns incredibly hostile.
Yeah, in 2023, the project was hit by two massive simultaneous shocks. First was the collapse of Daisy Global.
Let's break down the mechanics of this, because Daisy and blockchain sports were technically separate entities, but they shared the exact same bloodstream.
Look at the Venn diagram of the participants.
Yeah.
There was a massive overlap between the Limitless community, which, remember, was funding blockchain sports, and the participants in Daisy Global. The Limitless partners had essentially brought their existing network over to fund Diva's vision.
And then Daisy freezes. Withdrawals just stop.
And when a major platform freezes withdrawals in the crypto space, it creates an immediate contagion effect. Thousands of members suddenly lost access to their funds.
Which immediately kills the cash flow for blockchain sports. Because if your community's money is trapped in Platform A, they cannot buy founder packs in Platform B.
Exactly. The capital pipeline evaporated overnight. But, worse than the financial drought was the psychological contagion. These members were panicked. They had their capital frozen in Daisy, and suddenly all that desperation, all the demand for financial recovery transferred instantly onto blockchain sports.
They needed a lifeline.
Right. The community's patience shrank to absolute zero. They needed blockchain sports to save them.
We really need to pause here and state the official record very clearly. What was Dima's actual involvement with Daisy?
Dima has emphatically and consistently stated on the record that he had absolutely no relation to the creation, management, or collapse of the DAISY global projects. His position is that Jeremy, Edward, and Ilya were simply partners and investors who brought their network into his project. He was building football academies. DAISY was a separate universe.
But the market rarely cares about technical legal distinctions when panic sets in, right? In the eyes of the public, the two projects were linked by the people funding them, which perfectly sets up the second shock, reputational warfare.
Right as the DAISY collapse is happening, an anonymous Belize-registered website called Behind MLM launches a coordinated barrage of articles.
A hit piece campaign.
Exactly. They targeted the multi-level marketing structure of the distribution. They aggressively resurfaced Dima's 2017 criminal record in Belarus, and they heavily publicized the overlap between the blockchain sports community and the collapsed DAISY project.
But this wasn't just internet drama. This wasn't just a PR headache for them. This had catastrophic mechanical implications for the survival of the company, didn't it?
It was a lethal blow to their corporate strategy. Remember, Dima knew they were hundreds of millions of dollars short. He knew retail couldn't fund the gap. So the strategy was to take the momentum they had built and pivot to traditional institutional funds in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia to raise the massive capital they needed.
And these sovereign wealth funds, these massive venture capital firms, they have the kind of money that builds physical stadiums without even blinking.
And initially, the funds were highly receptive. The pitch, tokenizing global sports, physical academies in Brazil, it's an incredible vision. The term sheets were literally being drafted.
Wow.
But then, the deals moved from the visionary partners to the compliance stage.
So how does institutional due diligence actually work in a scenario like this?
It is ruthless, and it is algorithmic. A compliance officer at a Saudi fund doesn't care about the Brazilian academies. They run standard KYC Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering background checks. They search the founder's name globally.
And what hits their desk?
A confirmed criminal record for financial issues in Belarus, followed immediately by anonymous articles heavily associating the current project with a collapsed, multi-level marketing crypto scheme.
Imagine trying to get a mortgage, but every time the bank runs your name, they find an anonymous blog post calling you a huge financial risk. That was blockchain sports on a massive corporate scale, so they just stamped denied.
Automatically. The official strategy document explicitly states that this exact scenario killed deals at the compliance stage dozens of times. They were blocked at the gate over and over and over again.
So the institutional front door in the Middle East is bolted shut by compliance officers. The retail back door is choked off by the DAISY collapse. The company has no incoming capital, but they still have this sprawling global infrastructure to maintain.
Which plunges the ecosystem into what leadership now ominously calls the lost year.
The lost year. We're talking roughly 2024 into early 2025. What does the math look like when a company is in this state?
It looks like a slow-motion car crash. According to internal documents, the scale of the company had bloated to roughly 1,500 employees.
1,500 people.
Right.
Doing what?
Well, they had massive overhead. They were paying development teams in Minsk to build a proprietary Layer 1 blockchain, which, is incredibly complex and expensive software engineering.
Right.
They had physical leases on football fields in Brazil. They were paying scouting staff, video production teams, and marketing agencies. The stated cash burn rate hit $10 million per month.
Wait, $10 million a month? But we established they only raised roughly $30 million to begin with. The math doesn't just look bad, it looks impossible. How are they even functioning?
They had to execute a brutal triage. They slashed 80% of the staff, bringing the headcount down to around 300. There were painful salary delays in Belarus, which, to be fair, leadership insists were eventually fully repaid, but the strain was devastating.
And when a company is in survival triage, the roadmap is always the first thing to die.
Exactly. Promises made to the community started evaporating. The roadmap had promised nodes and staking features by April 2025. Those dates came and went. Members who bought into the Champions Pool expecting quick, automated profits were left with nothing but delays.
To the listener who lived through this, if you felt angry, if you felt like you were being lied to during this period, your frustration was completely validated by the mathematical reality behind the scenes. They simply did not have the money to build what they sold you.
And, to make matters worse, they faced internal market attacks.
Internal attack?
Yeah. The strategy document details an incident involving an entity called Boltz Capital. This group had supposedly invested $200,000 with a firm agreement to hold the tokens for the long term to support the ecosystem.
Okay.
Instead, they dumped their entire allocation onto the open market at the first opportunity.
Oh, man. So you have a project bleeding cash internally, missing deadlines, and now an insider is actively crushing the token price on the public exchanges to exit with a quick profit.
It was a perfect storm of starvation and market pressure.
So how did the lights stay on? If they are burning cash and VCs are rejecting them, who is actually paying the silver bills?
Personal sacrifice. The Adam Venture story document states that Dima, Gregory, and other senior executives had to inject their own personal capital. They diverted profits from entirely separate, independent businesses they owned directly into blockchain sports, purely to keep the infrastructure alive.
Which sets the stage for one of the most cinematic moments in this entire history, the Panama near miss.
It's late December. The situation is completely critical. An influencer in the space named Brett Barton connects Dima's team to a massive investor named Sean.
Okay.
Sean loves the vision. On Zoom, he verbally commits to a lifeline, an injection of $50 to $100 million. He tells the team to meet him in Panama to sign the term sheets.
This is the moment. They have been starving for a year, and a $100 million check is waiting in Panama.
So Dima and the senior team board a flight to Panama. But while they're midair over the ocean, Sean suffers a catastrophic medical emergency. Severe post-surgical complications.
Oh, my God.
His private flight is diverted midair, and he is rushed to a hospital.
It's almost unbelievable. The literal savior of the company is taken out by an act of fate hours before signing. But Dima's team, they are already in the air.
They land in Panama. They find out what happened. And instead of turning around and going home in defeat, they check into their hotel and they wait.
Just sitting in a hotel room hoping a billionaire recovers from surgery fast enough to sign a contract.
The deal never closed.
Yeah.
Sean had to focus on his recovery, understandably.
Right.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychological impact of that trip became central to the company's internal mythology. Dima uses the Panama story to demonstrate his ethos to his team and his community. He essentially says, "We flew across the world and waited for a man in a hospital bed. We do not quit." It solidified a culture of relentless, almost irrational persistence.
But, I mean, irrational persistence doesn't make payroll, right? They couldn't just sit in Panama forever. The Middle Eastern funds were blocked by compliance. The original community was exhausted. They needed a completely new vector. And surprisingly, the rescue didn't come from a venture capital firm. It came from a demographic pivot to the United States.
It was a master class in pivoting. If institutional money won't touch you because of a compliance checklist, you go back to retail. But you need a new retail audience that hasn't been burned by the Daisy collapse. So they connected with a major networker named Phil Godlewski.
And Phil brings in a massive wave of participants. We are talking roughly 35,000 active users, primarily drawn from a large, established silver buying community in the U.S.
And you might wonder, why a silver buying community?
Yeah, that seems random.
It's because that demographic is already primed for alternative assets. They are already skeptical of traditional banking, they understand holding non-standard assets for the long term, and they have discretionary capital. Godlewski completely opened up the U.S. market for the project.
What were the actual numbers on this rescue operation?
Staggering. At the June 22 leadership meeting, they claimed that between December 2025 and June 2026, they raised approximately $100 million.
$100 million.
Yeah. They stated roughly half came from Phil's community, a quarter from Brett Barton's network, and the rest from the founders' affiliated businesses.
$100 million in 6 months. That completely pulls them out of the grave.
It unfreezes development entirely. But, leadership had learned a brutal lesson during the lost year. You cannot build a sustainable technology company if your only source of revenue is selling tokens to new community members. That is exactly how you end up mathematically trapped.
You have to build an internal engine. You have to sell actual products to actual customers.
Exactly. And this is where the project fundamentally transforms from a quote-unquote blockchain football idea into a sprawling technology conglomerate. They launched JGGL.
Let's talk about JGGL because this represents a massive strategic shift. It's an AI music app. Why is a sports project building a music app?
Because of user friction. Getting a normal person to download a crypto wallet, secure a seed phrase, buy Ethereum, bridge it to a new network, and buy a token, it's incredibly difficult.
It really is. Most people just give up.
The conversion rate is terrible. But JGGL is a Web 2 application. You download it on the US Apple App Store, you use it to generate AI music, and you pay with a credit card or Apple Pay. It removes all the crypto friction. Leadership claims it is already generating roughly $5 million in revenue.
So they're using standard consumer tech to generate fiat cash flow to support the broader blockchain ecosystem.
And they didn't stop there. They launched Arena, which is a sports fan engagement platform, and Boostify. Dima even mentioned on a call that they have a neurodesign division generating $4 million in the Middle East.
Okay, so they have all these different pieces now. Brazilian football academies, a Belarusian Layer 1 blockchain, an AI music app in the App Store, a neurodesign team. It's a chaotic mix. But more importantly, having an AI music app doesn't suddenly make a Saudi compliance officer ignore those behind MLM articles, does it?
No, it doesn't. Which is why they executed the most critical maneuver in this entire story, the Delaware pivot.
I want to spend time on this because it is just brilliant legal engineering. How do you sanitize a project with a messy history?
You build a new container. They took all 13 to 16 of these disparate companies, the AI, the sports, the robotics, the music, and they grouped them under one massive corporate umbrella entity called Atom Venture Holdings. And they registered this holding company in Delaware.
Why Delaware, though? Why does every major corporation register in this tiny state on the U.S. East Coast?
Because Delaware corporate law is the gold standard for global institutional investors. It offers highly predictable courts, massive protections for corporate boards, and crucially, it allows a company to establish a clean, highly structured capitalization table, a cap table.
So they moved all the intellectual property, the code for JGGL, the rights to the blockchain. They transferred ownership of all of it to this clean Delaware entity.
Yes. They locked the IP in the United States, giving it massive legal protection, while keeping the actual software development operations running cost-effectively back in Minsk. And they claimed an internal valuation for this new holding company of $11.2 billion.
So let's just look at what they actually achieved here. To save a community-funded blockchain football project that started in Belarus, they essentially had to build a mass-market AI music app, create 15 side businesses, and wrap the entire thing in a highly regulated Delaware corporate structure. It was a Trojan horse.
It really was.
They built a traditional tech conglomerate just to finally get past the institutional compliance officers who had been rejecting them.
And it worked. By early 2026, the pivot was bearing fruit. They were securing commitments from massive U.S. funds. They were preparing to open a physical office in New York. They had mainstream credibility. They had completely climbed out of the grave.
But, and this is the most agonizing irony of this entire 3-year saga, their massive success in rebuilding the company accidentally armed a mathematical time bomb, and that time bomb is the August 17th token unlock.
This is the most critical technical concept we will discuss today. If you are listening to this right now and you hold ATLA tokens, you must understand the mechanics of what we are about to explain.
Let's talk about the illusion of wealth.
During the first half of 2026, as the project was recovering, new U.S. money was flowing in and the Delaware pivot was being finalized, the price of the ATLA token on public exchanges spiked dramatically. It shot up and stabilized near $150 per token.
Now put yourself in the shoes of a community member who has been holding since 2021. You suffered through the daisy collapse, you watched the roadmap fall apart during the lost year, you dealt with all the stress and the rumors.
It was exhausting for them.
Now, you log into your account. You see you have, say, 2,000 locked ATLA tokens. The screen says the current price is $150. You do the math, and you realize you have $300,000 sitting there. You feel like you won the lottery. You are making plans for that money.
It is an incredible psychological high. But it was an illusion built on a terrifying structural fragility. You have to understand market physics. A price quote on a screen is not a guarantee of value. It is simply a record of the last transaction. That $150 price was supported by what internal memos called a very thin order book.
Let's break that down mechanically. What makes an order book thin?
It comes down to the float, the actual number of tokens circulating and available to be traded on the open market. Out of a total supply of hundreds of millions of tokens, only a microscopic fraction, somewhere between 825,000 and 2 million ATLA tokens, were actually unlocked and trading on the exchanges.
So you have this tiny puddle of tokens changing hands between a small group of buyers and sellers, and that low supply environment is what drove the price up to $150.
Precisely. It is basic supply and demand. When supply is artificially restricted because 99% of the tokens are locked, A small amount of buying pressure causes the price to skyrocket.
But what happens on August 17th?
On August 17th, the smart contract lock expires. The floodgates are programmed to open.
If they do, the actual exchange liquidity, the amount of real fiat money waiting to buy tokens, can only support 4 to 5% of the holders exiting near that $150 price.
A quoted screen price is not the same thing as exit liquidity. The official strategy document spells it out with brutal clarity. They wrote, "No project in the world can withstand a mass dump of all locked tokens simultaneously. If we open the unlock under these conditions, the ATLA price will crash, destroying the capital of absolutely all participants." DEMA estimated the price would collapse from $150 down to 50 cents or $1 within 10 to 15 minutes.
Let's use a physical analogy. Imagine a massive, state-of-the-art stadium holding 300,000 people. The concert is amazing, everyone is having a great time. Then the show ends, and everyone decides they want to leave and go home at the exact same time. But the stadium was built with only one standard-sized single-file door leading out to the parking lot.
If a few people leave early, they walk right through. No problem at all.
But if 300,000 people rush that one door at the exact same second, nobody gets out. The pressure crushes everyone against the walls, the door frame shatters, and it's a catastrophic disaster. That is the physics of the August 17 unlock. 300 million tokens trying to squeeze through an exit door built with enough cash liquidity to handle 2 million. The price doesn't just dip, it gets violently obliterated through massive slippage.
And leadership knew they were mathematically trapped. They had survived a Belarusian prison, they survived the Daisy fallout, they survived the lost year. But they could not fight the physics of an exchange order book. However, they also knew they couldn't just unilaterally act like dictators and delay the unlock again.
Because they had already delayed promises during the lost year, the community's trust was hanging by a thread. If DEMA just issued a memo saying, "Sorry, we are locking your tokens for another year to protect the price," the community would riot. They would assume it was a scam.
So what do you do when you can't open the door because it will kill everyone, but you can't keep it locked because they will burn the building down?
What do you do?
You hand the steering wheel to the passengers. You initiate a democratic pivot.
Which brings us to the crucial events of mid-July 2026. Okay, so we've traced the entire arc. We have gone from a frozen car lot in a Belarusian currency crisis to a prison cell to building physical football academies in Brazil, surviving the collapse of a massive partner network, suffering through a year of starvation and a desperate flight to Panama, executing an American rescue operation, building AI music apps, wrapping it all in a Delaware holding company, and finally arriving at a mathematical standoff over a tiny exchange order book.
It is a corporate history defined entirely by near-death experiences and incredibly audacious pivots.
So how do we summarize this massive, complex reality for the listener who is sitting right now at this crossroads staring at their dashboard? I think, to be intellectually honest, we have to embrace a dual truth. Two seemingly contradictory things must be accepted as true at the exact same time.
What is the first truth?
The first truth is that the original timeline, the original budget, and the original promises made to this community absolutely failed. The project was launched severely underfunded. The communication during the lost year broke down completely. Trust was understandably fractured. If you are a listener who feels frustrated, exhausted, or angry by the delays and the shifting narratives, your frustration is completely mathematically validated.
I agree completely. That is undeniable. But the second truth is equally important and requires looking at the present objectively. The ATOM ecosystem that exists today is vastly more real, more diversified, and more legally robust than the fragile crypto idea that launched in 2020.
They survived multiple crises, regulatory, financial, and reputational, that would have instantly bankrupted 99% of startup companies. And they emerged on the other side with tangible products generating stated fiat revenue, heavily backed by American capital, all operating under a legally shielded U.S. corporate umbrella.
Both of those things are true. The original promise has slipped, and the resulting ecosystem is a vastly more powerful entity today.
So to you, the listener, sitting at this crossroads, whatever choice you make on that menu is valid. If you look at this 3-year history, if you see the relentless resilience of the founders, if you look at the Delaware pivot, the massive U.S. capital commitments, and the AI revenue, and you say, I want to convert to ATQM, take the SEC registration risk, and hold on for a traditional IPO that is a legitimate, reasoned, long-term venture capital choice.
And conversely, if you look at the broken timelines, the sudden changes in strategy, and the sheer emotional exhaustion of this 3-year roller coaster, and you choose, Option for the OTC exit to take your money and permanently walk away, that is also a completely legitimate, rational mathematical choice. It
Mm.
deserves total respect.
It really does.
The project has spent millions designing an orderly OTC exit door precisely because they recognize the validity of you wanting to leave. If the ATOM ecosystem successfully escapes the highly volatile, totally unregulated Wild West of community-funded token presales by actively transforming itself into a heavily regulated SEC-registered Delaware corporation, what does that signal to the broader market?
Does it mean the era of the pure crypto presale is dead?
Exactly. Are we witnessing real-time proof that in order to truly survive, to truly scale in the modern system of global finance, even the most rebellious decentralized blockchain startups must eventually capitulate? Must they all eventually put on a suit, file the disclosure paperwork, and play by Wall Street's rules?
That is a fascinating and maybe slightly terrifying thought to take with you as you log into your dashboard today and cast your vote. You started this journey in the muddy, chaotic waters of a Belarusian crypto presale, and you might just end it holding highly regulated equity in an American tech conglomerate.
A truly unprecedented evolution.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope exploring the mechanics of this history helps clear the muddy waters, giving you the exact technical context you need to navigate your own crossroads. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.